Hi, I'm Chef Gail Sokol and welcome to my kitchen. Today we're making pistachio almond rugelach. And you know what rugelach is? It's that Eastern European cookie that is so flaky, rolled around a delicious filling. And today I came up with a pistachio almond filling that is to die for. It is scrumptious and flaky and nutty. But before we get started, I want you to click that notification button because I want you to become a subscriber. I don't want you to miss any of my tips or videos because they're amazing and I love having you with me in my kitchen. It is a privilege. Okay, so pistachio almond rugelach. First we have to make the dough. The dough for rugelach is very standard. It's usually 2 cups of flour and then ½ a pound of butter, ½ a pound of cream cheese. And that's it. That's the entire dough. There's no sugar in it. But you have to let your cream cheese and your butter get to room temperature. So I have 8 ounces of cream cheese I've allowed to soften. You can also put it in your microwave. And I'm going to put it in my electric mixing bowl. It's nice and soft. And I have 2 sticks, which is also 8 ounces or ½ a pound of unsalted butter at room temperature. And I'm putting that into my electric mixer. And then I am going to cream that so that they just sort of get blended together, all right? And I'm not trying to beat air into them, I'm just trying to cream them together. And very slowly, once they come together, they're sort of fighting in the mixer. All right, get along, guys. All right, they're all right. I am going to add, on low speed, 2 cups of all-purpose flour. All right? And while they're doing that, I'm going to go get a rubber spatula. So this will help me get it out of the bowl because I'm going to wrap it in plastic wrap and I'm going to let it rest to firm up a little bit because the butter and cream cheese are really too soft to roll out because we're going to be rolling these into rectangles, which is not the traditional way to make rugelach. All right, so everything is, let me show you what it looks like. So you can see butter and cream cheese, nice and yum. All right, nice and yummy looking. And I'm just going to scrape the sides down. Get it off the paddle for a second, let everybody get mixed together. And we are ready to add our flour. What I love about this dough, you can actually freeze it, use it later, you don't have to use it now. Just date it and label it so you don't go back to your freezer in 6 months and say, what the heck is that? I've done that. So date it and label it with a little, some sort of a label on it or a marker. So I'm going to add this on low speed. It doesn't have to be added quickly. It doesn't have to be added all at once. It can be added all at once. Do whatever is good for you. Low speed. And I'm just going to get that all in there. And then our dough is done. So rugelach is very, very delicious, but it's based really on the filling. The filling makes the rugelach. I should make a book about that. The filling makes the rugelach. It really does. So I'm going to get the rest of that flour in there, and you're going to see it forms a dough, a very wet dough. All right, a very wet dough. So we're not ready to roll this out just yet, but I want to show you what it looks like. So it's sort of crumbly, a little bit messy looking. See what that is? Okay, so we're going to clean it off the paddle. And we are going to wrap it and give it a little bit of a rest so that the butter and the cream cheese firm up just enough to allow us to divide the dough into 4 pieces and roll them out. We're going to roll them into smaller rectangles, not huge, like 12 by 8 inches, not that big. Traditionally, rugelach, the way I used to make it until I found this better way to make it, is usually in a round. You cut it in a round, and then you put your filling on, and then cut it into like pie wedges, like you're cutting a pie or pizza, and then roll up each wedge. So that's really pretty, and that's really nice, and it looks like a little crescent roll, a little crescent cookie. The problem is the filling sometimes comes out. I don't like that. I want my filling in there. So I am going to have a surefire way of not losing the filling. All right, we're going in with our hands, folks. I can't help it. All right, I can't ever leave my hands out of something, because you see that? You see that little bit of rough flour? All right, so we want to get that in there. So use your hands, and don't knead it. Just sort of get that flour in there so that it's really brought into that dough. All right, we need all of it. Come on, guys, get in. Come on. All right, so we're getting there. And then I'm going to take a piece of plastic wrap, and I'm going to wrap it, and I'm going to let it rest. I'd say about an hour in the fridge. You don't want it too hard, or you're not going to be able to roll it out, but you don't want it too soft. I've had it get super soft. If it ever gets soft, you put it back in the fridge. But my way, you're not going to have a problem. All right, I'll show you. I will show you my way. So follow Chef Sokol's way, and you will have amazing rugelach. I have another rugelach recipe and a video on YouTube, and you can get the recipe for that one from my website, chefgailsokol.com, for chocolate walnut dried cherry rugelach. It's amazing as well, but this is a little different. So what I'm going to do is just put that in there. And the name of the game, I always say whenever I make a dough, there's a shape of the day. The shape of the day is rectangle. So today we're going to try to get our little package into a rectangle. See what I did? So I made it into a disc in a rectangle. If I was making a round, let's say a pie crust, with a flaky pie crust, I would get it into a round. You want to get it into the shape that it's ultimately going to be in. It will make it easier to roll out and easier to shape your ultimate cookie or pie or whatever you're making. So I'm putting this into the fridge for about an hour, or my freezer for about 15 to 30 minutes, depending on how cold your freezer is. You just want it firm enough to roll out. I'll see you back. So it's time to make our pistachio almond filling, and it is lovely. So I have my dough in my freezer right now because we want to hurry up and get rugelach made, right? So in a food processor, and this is the best way to get this filling going, is I have 1/2 cup plus 2 tablespoons granulated sugar. If you ever want to chop up nuts, this is the way to do it, folks. 1/2 cup of pistachios that are roasted. They're not salted. If you like a little extra salty filling, like sweet and salty, use the salted ones, but these are great. They're roasted, but they're not salted. 1/2 cup. And now I'm going to give them a whirl because they're going to give off oil. Pistachios, any nut has a natural oil on it, a delicious oil. That's why they're so good for you and your heart. So I am going to pulverize them. How's that for a word? And I'm going to cover my food processor because it always throws some sugar and pistachios out. So I'm going to pulse it in the beginning, and then I'm just going to let her rip. And I'm going for the gold, folks. I want it completely pulverized to a real fine powder. All right. And that's what I got. So you can see, really nice and fine, okay? You see that? Really fine. If you see like 1 or 2 little pistachios that skipped it, that's all right. All right, so now we're gonna add our almond paste. Pistachio and almond always go together for me. I think, like in pistachio ice cream, whenever I make that from scratch, I always put a little almond extract in that. So almond paste will give that je ne sais quoi, just punches up the flavor. And nothing punches up flavor like almond paste. And you don't taste the almond paste as much as you really do the pistachio, because it's fabulous. All right, 7 ounces or about 1/2 cup of almond paste, and you're going to put that into the pistachios, and I've broken it up a little bit. Sometimes almond paste can get hard in the container. If it's been refrigerated, let it sit out at room temperature. Put it in, and then we're going to pulverize this again. So we really want this in little pieces, like tiny little, almost like flour, like meal. All right, so you're just going to pulverize it. You don't want it in chunks, because we need to spread it on our dough, and if we've gone to the trouble to chill our dough, we don't want it to rip. No ripping, not in Chef Gail's kitchen, not for her rugelach. All right, so let's check it out. So you can see how nice and pulverized that is? Almost feels like wet sand, because the almond paste, oh my goodness, that aroma is intoxicating. But the pistachios and the almonds are, unbelievable. So what we're basically doing is punching up the flavor of the pistachios with the almond. But it feels like wet sand. The pistachios were really dry. The sugar really absorbed all the oil, so we didn't get pistachio butter. You know, we didn't get that like mash, like peanut butter. We don't want that consistency. We want to have it to have a little texture, but we also want to get it relatively smooth. Remember, there's nuts in here, so it's never going to be totally smooth. So once we have this, we are going to add 1 egg, 1 large egg, the whole egg. Okay. And then I am going to add a teaspoon of almond extract and a teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. Work your magic. And then 4 tablespoons of heavy cream. All right, 4 tablespoons. And what I have in the wings is 1 more tablespoon, because Chef Gail is prepared. Just in case it's a little dry, we want it to be a little bit more moist. We want it spreadable, but we don't want it oozing out of the dough. All right, and this looks pretty good. All right, so I will show you what this looks like. So you can see, I don't think it needs that extra tablespoon. It depends. If you feel like it does, or you used a little too many pistachios and it's just a little dry, you can do that. But I think that is spreadable, and I think that's going to be nice. So I am going to transfer this to a bowl to make it much more easy to get to once we roll out our dough. And then it's time to fill and bake our rugelach. So I'll see you back. So my beautiful rugelach dough has firmed up a bit, but enough that I can roll it out. Not too mushy and not too hard. If it's like this, leave it out at room temperature for a little while. So when I put it in the freezer, very often after 15, 20 minutes, it gets a little hard. I take it out, just let it relax a little. Just make sure you don't forget that it's there, and you do roll it out. And we have our beautiful, beautiful filling. And on top of that, I like a little crunch, a little texture, right? It is pistachio. 1 1/3 cups finely chopped. I did these by hand. You can do them in a food processor, but a food processor is really going to go into a super, super fine mode. I just want these fine, but not ground. All right, so those are going to be on top of it, on top of our filling. So you're ready to fill some rugelach. So here's our dough. I'm going to unwrap it in its little blankets. And we're going to keep this plastic wrap because we're going to divide it into fourths. We're going to make 4 logs. Okay, 4 logs. And you can see little swirls of butter and cream cheese. And that is where your flaky layers come from, people. This is where, once you get it in the oven, the butter's going to melt and form little spaces, and the cream cheese is going to melt into the dough, and those spaces are going to fill with steam, and it's actually going to puff up and make beautiful flaky layers. All right, so I'm going to cut this just Just eyeball it. I like to use a dough cutter, but you can actually use a knife as well. Never rip your dough. You want to cut it. So remember, we're keeping the rectangular shape. That's the shape of the day. All right. And I'm going to take the remaining 3 squares and put them back on the plastic wrap. If at any point my plastic wrap or my doughs, my little my little doughs there that are left, 3/4 of the dough, get too soft, I can put them back in the fridge, okay? My kitchen's nice and cool right now, so I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, now we want to roll this little tiny rectangle into a 12 by 8 inch larger rectangle. And that's not that big, so 12 inches from here to here, not that big, 12 by 8. So I have my ruler here. And I flour it. You're going to need flour. Use the flour. Okay? Use the flour. Sometimes I say don't use flour. Here you want to use some flour. Not a huge amount, but enough. And you're going to roll it. And if it's a little firm, just push down on it. But again, what's the shape of the day? Rectangle. So we want to make sure everybody is still at a rectangle. So I'm going to start rolling, and I'm going to rotate it, and I'm going to keep it in a rectangular shape. If you sort of morph into a different shape, you have to sort of say, hey, I'm the baker, I'm the boss. So you have to sort of go back and show it who's boss. So get into a rectangular shape. So it's easier to go from one side and roll, then the middle and roll, and then that little dip that you see here will even out. Sometimes you need to roll in thirds. All right, so roll in the center, and roll in the end. And then do it again. And then every once in a while, we're going to take a measurement and see what we got. Use your hand as sort of a guide to make an edge. It's an edger. Didn't you know your hand was an edger? Your hands are really the best tools. I kid you not. All right, so we're still not there yet. We are now at 10 inches this way. So I'm going to go this way because it's easier for me to roll it. And it's very easy to roll out. So you don't want to put all your muscle into it. This is a delicate dough. Treat it as such, okay? This is your friend. And you want to treat it very delicately. And remember, 12 by 8 isn't that much. All right, so we are at 12. We are not at 8. We are almost at 8. Believe it or not, we are almost at 8. So we are going to just go a little bit more here. The middle, on the left. And if you see it's a little thicker in one area than the other, just sort of straighten it out. It doesn't have to be perfect because the chef eats the ends of the rugelach, okay? That's a well-known fact, right? So let's take a measurement. We are at 12. We are a little bit over 8. Not going to worry about it. Now here I have a sheet pan with wax paper on it, about the length of a little bit more than my dough. So it's about the length and the width of the sheet pan. And now I'm going to gently take this dough and I'm going to lift it up onto the sheet pan. And then I'm going to take another piece of wax paper and put it on top. So what I'm doing is I'm rolling out each quarter of the dough into a 12 by 8 inch rectangle and putting it on that wax paper. And then as we work them more, and of course the rolling causes friction and it warms up, I may need to let them rest in the fridge or firm up a little bit. So you have this sheet pan ready with your 4 doughs. You could even do this the night before you want to make rugelach and then just leave it out a little bit to get to room temperature a little bit, not enough, just rollable so it's actually able to be rolled because it would get too hard in the fridge. But if these ever get too soft, they're ready to go. So you just grab one of these and you actually use the wax paper to help you roll. See, there's always some trick that you got to learn, some hack, and it's super easy to do. So I'm going to continue rolling out my 12 by 8 inch rectangles from the remaining 3 rectangles, and I'll see you back and ready to fill. So I've rolled out my 4 rectangles of dough. I have layered them on wax paper in between, all right, on one sheet pan, and I have kept them in the fridge. So each time you get one, you can put the remainder on the sheet pan in the fridge if you want to maintain some coolness if your kitchen's warm. So you're not going to roll them freehand because your hands are warm and things are going to happen that are not good. Now, I made an executive decision while I was rolling out my dough that my filling needed an extra tablespoon of cream, so I put it in. So mine has 5 tablespoons. You may need 4, you may need 5. It depends on what, on the temperature, on how much you ground it, and on the consistency. So I'm going to, before I even do any filling, I'm preheating my oven. 350 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, 350 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to take 1/3 cup of my filling, my beautiful filling, and I'm going to put it on top of my rectangle. All right. And it will be like pistachio butter, but it has so much more flavor. And you don't want to eat any of this raw because it does have some raw egg. And I'm measuring it because I need 4 of these, 4 amounts. So I have about 1 1/3 cups. So I'm going to take a tiny offset spatula and gently I'm going to spread it. Now, the colder your dough, the easier it'll be to spread. You don't want to rip the dough. Ripping the dough is going to destroy layers of your precious rugelach. It's precious, all right? So you're going to spread it all the way to the ends of the dough, all the way to the edges, all the way as far as you can get them. And then we're going to pack on some finely chopped pistachios, about 1/3 cup for each rectangle. And if you have to, sometimes I rotate my rectangle of dough on my wax paper. So I just sort of go, woo, all right, and just sort of do a little 180 there just to get it so that I have the other side I can spread it to. All right, and be very gentle. This is not a yeast dough. This is not a dough that you can fool with. It's a very delicate dough, but it's so worth it. Oh, it's so worth it. All right, so if you were doing this in a round, all right, you would cut this into wedges after if it was a round. But we're going to do it so we're not going to lose any precious filling. Because sometimes the filling will come out. We're going to make logs. I have a little bit on the edges here, so I'm just going to sort of scrape that up. And I'm trying to go as far to the edge as I can with as much of this as I can. And don't worry if your edges aren't perfect. Don't worry. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. And I'm going to eyeball this. I'm going to take about 1/3 cup. And I'm going to scatter all my good stuff. Some little pieces are bigger than, there's some pieces that are bigger than others, but that's okay. But I did this by hand. Like I said, if you don't want to do it by hand, you don't have to. And if you wanted to use another nut, you could. But I just love pistachio. So now I'm going to take my rolling pin and just sort of give them a little pat, 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 pat. So we get them adhered to our filling and we don't lose it. All right, we don't want to lose anybody. Now you're going to take your wax paper, and it's usually from your end, and you're going to gently just roll it in like you're rolling up a towel, and you're making sort of like a cinnamon roll. And you're just going to let this roll. Again, you don't want the dough too cold. You want it malleable but not hot. and the wax paper keeps you and your 98.6 degree body away from the dough. All right, it's a buffer, so that you're just going to roll it and try to roll as tight as you can. Keep going. Keep going. See, I'm making a log, like a giant pistachio log of goodness. Just keep it going, keep it going, keep it going. And then you're going to just roll it back a little bit. If it rips a little, don't worry about it. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. And you see the seam? Don't even worry about pinching it. Put the seam side down. I have a sheet pan with parchment paper. Now remember, not wax paper. Wax paper cannot go in the oven. Don't put wax paper in the oven. I don't want to hear from anybody that melted their rugelach onto their parchment, onto their wax paper. No, no, no. So we're going to transfer this log onto the lengthwise, the long way, onto our parchment coated sheet pan. All right, and we're going to leave it. And then you're going to take a knife, a small sharp paring knife, and you're going to cut. You're going to make cuts maybe every 1 inch, every ½ an inch, depending on how big you want your rugelach to be. But don't cut all the way through. You just want to score. Okay, just score. Just score. I'm making them smaller today, but if you want, in my directions, I said every 1 inch. This is about every ½ an inch. So I'm going to have double the amount of rugelach. Nothing wrong with that, right? Nothing wrong with that. But if you want 1 inch, my recipe says they make about 40. You're going to make 4 logs. So you're going to make between probably about 10 of the, so each one's going to be a rugelach each time you cut it. So it's going to bake like a scored log for 40 to 50 minutes until it's nice and golden brown. You may see a little filling pop up because it's almost like a frangipane filling because it's got that raw egg. It gives it structure and it's going to puff up a little bit, and the rugelach may puff up a little bit. And when it comes out of the oven, that's when we cut them and see the goodness and all the spirals inside. So I'm going to continue rolling these. I'm going to bake 2 logs on 1 sheet pan. So you're going to need 2 sheet pans with parchment. And I'm going to take 2 logs on each one, 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 40 to 50 minutes until you see it nice and brown, and I'll see you back. So I am surrounded, as you can see, surround sound pistachio almond rugelach. They have cooled down a little bit, and that's what you want. You don't want to cut them when they're hot, and you want to use a serrated knife, okay? Because there's nuts in them, it makes it an easier cut. So I took one of the rolls, I put it on a cutting board, and I have a serving platter. You can, do whatever you want. You can freeze them in an airtight container. I'm going to slowly seesaw it until I go down and then cut. That's an end, not as pretty. That's for me later. I love to do that. I love, it's also quality control, right? Don't you need to check it out? And if they flake a little bit, that's okay, baby, because they're supposed to be flaky inside. They are gorgeous. So I'm going to put a few over here. You're going to keep on slicing, cutting gently with your serrated knife and going down. And then once you have enough, I'm going to, you don't have to do this. This is optional in the recipe, but I like to dredge them with a little sugar. They're not overly sweet. Sometimes I take them and dredge them instead of dusting. And here I'm just going to dust a little bit of sugar over the top. And I just love the way they look. They just look really, really pretty. You can see the layers. You can see the pistachio. You can see everything, and it looks so pretty. So I'm going to put them on here. Hopefully, you'll think this is pretty. I like to build pyramids, but this is not like the pyramids of Egypt. These are unbelievable, unbelievable. And I'm just going to put them one on top of the other so you can see. just like a little serving suggestion. And then you can have, because I like to highlight the swirls and I love the way they look. They are scrumptious and I cannot wait till you try to make these pistachio almond rugelach. They are, mwah, you're gonna love them. They're so flaky. You won't be able to say anything but, they're delicious. So until next time, make these.